Now, can everyone hear me? Does anyone hear me? No one can hear me? Okay, thank you. Thanks you, Father, for confirming. Wonderful, thank you. Okay, so my name is Doro Kostake. I'm a Romanian Orthodox priest. I'm a theologian by training. I have never studied the sciences, but I am very much interested in the world of science, to which I have access by way of, say, popularization. And my interest in cosmology has begun long ago with my doctoral project at the University of Bucharest in '95, when what I tried to do was verify the theological significance of the anthropic principle from the viewpoint of a Byzantine theologian, St. Maximus the Confessor, and a modern Orthodox theologian, Father Dumitru Stăniloae. So I haven't undertaken any scientific research in the anthropic principle, and therefore I am very much interested in what Alexei has to say about it. I'm a theologian, that's it. Anyway, institutionally speaking, I'm an associate professor with the Sydney College of Divinity, which is a consortium of theological colleges of various denominational backgrounds. I am also a research director of ISCAST, which stands for the Institute for the Study of Christianity in an Age of Science and Technology. And since 2017, I have been associated as an honorary fellow with the Department of Studies in Religion at the University of Sydney. My presentation actually will be by necessity incomplete, because the first paper that I'll be presenting for some reason I can't share. Why can't I share? I wanted to share my paper. It doesn't matter. What matters is that this first paper, what we know and what we don't know about the universe, the scientists and the theologians' views of reality, was written together with Geraint Lewis, an astrophysicist from the University of Sydney. And he, of course, would have much more to say about these things than I do, and it's a pity that he could not attend. He has time actually for research, and which was allocated some time ago to him, and it's impossible to do otherwise. Anyway, what I'll try to do is walk you through this paper. I don't know, for some reason it doesn't. I would have wanted to share it. It doesn't allow me to share my.
Yes, because this is because your security preferences from settings does not allow it. It's not about Zoom. Go to
it's not Zoom.
No.
Here.
Yes.
Open preferences.
Exactly.
Okay. And
unlock.
Yes.
Put your password. Your login password.
Sorry for this, gentlemen.
It's a thing from Apple
okay.
for security reasons.
So thank you for being here and
now
saving the day.
You will select it.
Okay.
Sorry, select it.
They want me to quit. No, I can't do that.
Okay, later. It will probably be able to do it. Close now.
Mm-hmm.
Close the window and check.
And try now. Okay. Excellent. Thank you very much. Wonderful. Done. Yeah, because I thought it would be better for everyone to take a look at the paper as it stands. And there's, of course, a nice motto that Geraint and I found in H.P. Lovecraft. We are both nerds. We enjoy classical science fiction literature. And I thought that this line or this sentence here captures very well our message. Though the arena of the unknown has been steadily contracting for thousands of years, an infinite reservoir of mystery still engulfs most of the outer cosmos. So that's Lovecraft in his famous essay, Supernatural Horror in Literature. Now, I'll be reading Geraint's introduction, the prologue to our article, and then move through it quickly. So, this subject raises primal questions of origin and future, and our place in the cold, dark cosmos. Here, a scientist, Geraint Lewis, and a theologian, Doro Kostake, explore just what we know and what we don't know about the universe and the impact of current knowledge on our philosophical and theological views of reality. By the way, it seems that there is a trend among scientists, and we have heard Alexei earlier talking about it, ascertaining the need for philosophy to be brought at the table to mediate between these estranged siblings, theology and science. Are the views of science and theology in conflict, or is there an underlying harmony to seemingly disparate worldviews? While these questions constitute the backdrop of this undertaking, in what follows, okay, thankfully I was there. In what follows, the authors focus on matters specific to the interests of scientific cosmology and of the theological view of the universe, respectively. Now, Geraint speaks in the first part of his contribution of the history of cosmology as a scientific discipline, especially in the 20th century, and of course the beginning of this side of history, and brings things closer and closer to our time and to our topic of epistemology and gnoseology. What do we actually know? How much do we know about the universe? Perhaps there's room for another, perhaps deeper question: how certain is our knowledge of the universe? But this isn't a topic I assume that a scientist would readily agree to discuss, to address. Perhaps we know that in some cases, and I know a couple of such scientists, real scientists, who actually have question marks about the validity of the scientific method, which is quite interesting from my viewpoint as a theologian. Now, in regard to what we know about the universe, Geraint provides us with a summary. I'll go just quickly through these headings. The universe had a beginning, and we have already heard about Alexei in regard to the Big Bang theory. Geraint doesn't hypothesize as to the validity of the Big Bang theory. He takes it for granted as part of the current narrative, because regardless of how much scientists, cosmologists would like us to believe in their objectivity, there is a narrative there, and the fact that everyone speaks of Big Bang, for example, is part of a faith system, a belief system. Okay. Then another heading of interest for Geraint: the universe has evolved and changed, which is, of course, something that's quite simple and straightforward for most of us, but he is also mindful of the fact that in certain milieus, including in Orthodox Christianity, there isn't always so clear that we can theologize about the universe and also agree to the idea that the universe changes. But this is something that Geraint says we know. Another topic: the universe is dominated by the dark side. Of course, the sci-fi, the Star Wars reference is transparent. By dark side, Geraint understands what we know as dark matter and dark energy, and he takes it for granted. He takes it as a given. Yes, there is this dark side to the universe. It has no ethical or pessimistic connotation. The phrase simply refers to dark matter and dark energy. What else he says to us, and this is something that is a bit of a puzzle to me, but I'm no scientist, the universe is winding down, he says, slowing down. I can't discuss this. He has his own arguments, his approach to the topic, but this is what he says, that the universe is winding down and that at some point it'll stop expanding, which is something that is not so good for us living things. Now, I found it, however, more interesting, at least from my viewpoint, the part of his contribution where he speaks of what we don't know. And I'd like to read parts of it. A summary from him. So far we've looked at the successes of modern cosmology, but it would be wrong to think that the job is done and that there is nothing left to learn. Of course, nothing here of the naive faith of 19th century physicists who believe that the final knowledge of the universe is right after the next corner. We definitely know more than we did a few short decades ago, but there are worrying holes in our understanding that keeps astronomers up at night. There is no definitive list of these, but some of the biggest questions are as follows. So, like Alexei, Geraint compiled his own list of hot topics, to paraphrase Alexei. What Geraint says, as a physicist, as a scientist, we don't know where the universe comes from. And I believe that this is very important, There's nothing of that 100% certainty that we know everything about the beginning or the initial conditions of the universe. He says we don't actually know where the universe comes from. He gives some history here, but also goes through a number of more recent developments. Perhaps I should read a bit. Was the Big Bang the true beginning of the universe, he asks. As discussed, Lemaitre was the first to rewind the expansion of the cosmos and identify a specific starting point, but does this imply that the universe somehow sprang from a true nothing, a nothing of no time and no space? This universe from nothing, and I think what he says here is very interesting in the context of Alexei's reference to ex nihilo. So this universe from nothing remains a point of argument among both physicists and philosophers, being highly unsatisfactory in terms of explaining the universe's existence. There's agreement here between you and him, given the apophatic aspect of your approach. There is currently a problem with fundamental physics that prevents us from pinpointing the true birth of the universe. As we look back in time when the universe was hotter and denser, we rely on finer and finer physics to explain what is happening from atomic through nuclear to fundamental particles. Before about 10 minus 6 seconds, we know that our theories are not perfect, but we can push back with what we know to around 10 minus 40 seconds where we hit a brick wall. Is it the Planck?
Long time.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so this is, I think it's interesting. Why? Because it leads, what he says here leads to later developments in his contribution, and somehow my own, that there is this need for humility, some kind of apophatic attitude, even in science. So, if we crack the mathematics of the theory of everything, what might we find? We could discover that the Big Bang was the ultimate beginning, and we will just have to live with that. Others have speculated that our universe might be just one in an infinite sequence of universes that are born, live, and die only to be reborn again, and so on and so forth. So, in reality, there are so many competing interpretations within science itself that I wonder to what extent scientific cosmology can be considered 100% descriptive science, objective science. So
Natural science.
yeah. So I found this expose coming from Geraint, who isn't what you would call a believer, you know. I found it refreshing because it somehow shows that in reality we are all strugglers. Scientists, philosophers, theologians, we are all strugglers. And I think this is the beauty of the entire human undertaking, after all. And I actually admire, Alexei, what you keep repeating. This is a human thing. It's a human achievement. Even the fact that we can realize that we don't know, it's a human achievement, and we should be proud about it. Okay. Moving on a bit, Geraint also speaks of the dark side as a mystery and remaining a mystery. Dark matter and dark energy dominate the universe. Dark matter provides the gravitational framework in which galaxies and stars can form, whilst dark energy is driving the universal expansion faster and faster. Our everyday matter, formed from atoms, is essentially going along for the ride. But despite its dominance, the actual nature of either of these dark components remains mysterious. Dark matter is thought to be a fundamental particle, a currently unknown member of the particle physics zoo, that contains the electrons and quarks that form the matter we are familiar with. The mathematics of particle physics has proven extremely successful in explaining fundamental interactions, such as the myriad of particles thrown out in experiments such as the Large Hadron Collider. But within these mathematics, there is no obvious place for a candidate for a dark matter particle. This has led physicists to propose a range of different mathematical extensions to the standard model of particle physics, which each with new possible candidates that could be dark matter, and so on and so forth. The nature of dark energy, likewise, is essentially unknown. The cosmological equations tell us its bulk properties, but offer no clues about its fundamental source. Some physicists have suggested that maybe dark energy is a property of the quantum vacuum, a strange consequence of virtual particles popping in and out of existence, but while attractive, theoretical expectations and observation limits differ by roughly 10 to the power of 120, the largest discrepancy in all of physics. And so on and so forth. I'm sorry to have to skip these parts. I'm certain that some of you understand more than I do, much more than I do, these things. And I'm also sorry for the fact that you won't be able to address these matters with me, because I'll have nothing to say about it. But it'll be interesting if you have any questions or comments to make, to convey them to Geraint and see if we can elicit a response from him. The mysterious nature of the dark sector has led some physicists to propose that we need to return to the drawing board. This is amazing. The problem, they say, is not the existence of strange substances in the universe, but the failure in our physical theories to describe the universe. Again, is it a descriptive science? Or is there everything hermeneutical after all? As you said, actually. The suggestion is that Einstein's general theory of relativity is only an approximation of a true gravitational theory which we have yet to discover. Once we have this new theory in hand, it will be able to describe the motions of stars and the expansion of the universe with reliance on any dark side components, and so on. Another highlight, we don't understand why the universe is the way it is, and I think this is where Geraint hits the metaphysical dead end of physics, isn't it?
Yeah.
This kind of question. Our metaphysical theories of the universe depend on quantities we must measure from nature. As an example, the speed of light, usually represented as c in equations, can be found in electromagnetism and so on. To determine this, we undertook experiments and found that light travels at almost 300,000 k's per second. This is true not only regarding the speed of light. Our theories fail to predict other key aspects of the universe, including the masses of fundamental particles such as the electron and the quarks, and the strengths of fundamental forces. Why do these numbers, known as fundamental constants, the great big numbers of the universe, have the values they do? We do not know. But physicists can play what-if games and consider other alternative universes where these constants take on different values. And this harks back to the topic of the multiverse. I would have loved to have Geraint here to talk to you or with you about the multiverse. And so on and so forth. Another one, do we really know where the universe is going? He says reluctantly that we might have an idea, but there's nothing of certainty about it. I'll jump to his conclusions. This chapter opened with the recognition that modern cosmology, founded on observations with powerful telescopes coupled with leading theories of fundamental physics, represents a success of the scientific endeavor. All the evidence points to us inhabiting a universe which is almost 14 billion years old, and that was formed in a cataclysmic event we call the Big Bang. So this would be, or these two would be the main things that we are somehow certain of. Since then, the universe has been constantly expanding and cooling, evolving and changing with the formation of galaxies, stars, planets, and eventually people. This proves cosmic evolution is not over and will continue into the future as stars burn hydrogen into heavier elements. Eventually, this nuclear fuel will be exhausted and the universe will plunge into darkness, fading away into eternity as it approaches a seemingly inevitable heat death. That's his preferred theory of the end. As humans, we acknowledge our own mortality in the knowledge that as a species and as a culture, we will live on. The mortality of the universe, with no endless future laid out for us, represents little more than cold comfort, so no anthropic principle either. However, our physical understanding of the universe is not complete to where our universe has come from and to where it is going. We lack an understanding of what the dominant components of the universe actually are, or why our universe possesses the particular combination of properties that allow us to be here. The search is on for the next level of physical theory, the theory of everything, that may pull back the curtain and reveal the answer to the most fundamental of questions. I love this may. As Roger Penrose said in his book on mind, computers, and all that, even if we do that, even if we get to the theory of everything, we might miss the final algorithm of things. So even if we find it, we won't be able to ascertain as to its authenticity. Is it this, or should we look for something else? And written within it, the theory of everything, might be our universe's place in the overall scheme of universes, be just one step within an ever-playing cycle from cosmic birth to cosmic death and back again. Modern cosmology tells us that us humans on a small planet orbiting a normal star in a typical galaxy will only be here for the briefest moment in the lifespan of the cosmos. We live at a time where there is abundant starlight and elements that allow us to exist. That ontological dimension that makes us possible here, you know? Not yesterday, perhaps not tomorrow, but today.
Contingent.
Yeah.
Contingent
Yeah.
upon them, yeah.
We are contingent upon these conditions of the universe. In the distant universe, we will be gone. Bad news. But long after our passing and long into its future history, maybe, just maybe, our universe will be reborn. Origen, Plotinus, and others will be very interested in hearing this theory. Now, we move to the second part of the contribution, which is my section, Theological Perspectives. If you have anything to judge, condemn, refute, and so on and so forth, please feel free to do so. I'll be grateful for anything that you'll have to say about this part of the paper. It has been observed that upon the dawning of modern cosmology, with its infinite universe and vast, mind-boggling perspectives of space and time, believers experienced a shock. The contours of their hierarchically ordered world vanished, seemingly the universe no longer supporting their customary values and qualitative judgments. I made some changes in the morning after 2 a.m. when I woke up. So the text might differ from time to time. Blaise Pascal captured this shock by referring to the infinite immensity of the spaces I ignore and that ignore me. Uttering the famous cry, "The eternal silence of these infinite spaces frightens me." It was the realization of a new and strange universe, an infinite sphere whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. Within an infinite open universe, affirming God's existence and traditional wisdom had become impossible, historians of science tell us. The shock of these early modern believers must have been as profound as what their predecessors experienced at the daybreak of the second millennium, when the Lord's glorious return, expected by some to occur literally around the year 1000, did not happen. Contemporary cosmology appears to have a similar impact upon the perceptions of believers, at least in the eyes of those antagonists who claim that there is neither room for nor evidence of God in the universe as we know it. This conviction is indirectly confirmed by the Christian apologists who shout out loud the idea of God no matter what, even when the evidence stares them in the face, telling them that the universe is not as they, drawing on medieval patterns of thinking, imagine it to be. For the God of the gaps, lurking in the cracks and the clefts of the scientific narrative, and the interventionist God that does away with the natural laws at whim, are not of one piece with the traditional Christian faith. Truth be told, too many of us believers, think that they defend the faith when they just cannot get rid of the outdated science and certain wrong theological ideas of ages past, including the topics of a God of the gaps and an interventionist God. As for me, while I sympathize with my fellow believers who attempt to defend their convictions about God and the universe no matter what, I am of the view that wrong ideas should not be upheld at all, even in the name of faith. After all, Christ exhorts us to adhere to the truth that makes us free, not to the father of lies. Okay, that's introducing me as a subjective thinker, theologically trained. In adopting this approach, personal, I observe what Andrew Louth considers intrinsic to working in the humanities, including theology, namely the thinker's person with its inner world of thoughts, emotions, and aspirations. My search for the truth as such is subjective. I filter everything, even scientifically obtained knowledge, through my training and experience. Long ago, St. Augustine articulated this approach with utmost clarity when he said, "It is in you, my soul, that I measure the times." The reader will therefore have to bear with me. When I read narratives such as the one just above, so I call Geraint's account a narrative, I cannot not ask a question which bothers many of my fellow believers in our day and age. That is, does the current scientific representation of reality challenge my faith, my worldview? I am aware that not all believers profess the same view of the cosmos, its nature, and its future as I do, and that my following response might seem peculiar to some of them. Accordingly, I shall not try to address the concerns of believers of other persuasions, but I still hope that my response will still stir the interest of those who, like me, are familiar with the spirit of the Christian tradition, not merely its letter. In short, my answer to the above question is negative. I am not in distress because of the current incapacity of science to gauge the universe's beginning, regardless of how convinced certain scientists might be that there is a beginning. or because the cosmos continues to evolve and change since billions of years ago, or because the universe is swayed by such elusive factors as dark matter and dark energy, or finally, because its expansion appears to wind down and the world will one day cease to be. The early Christian and medieval theologians on whose wisdom I build my view of things considered cosmic beginnings from diverse perspectives, confessing their incapacity to fathom what, by all intents and purposes, is incomprehensible and ineffable. So again, Alexei's apophaticism. Noteworthy is Basil of Caesarea's stance, who considered the topic from various angles and who ended by expressing the impossibility to understand the beginning. In the same vein, closer to our time, Vladimir Lossky discussed the need to adopt an apophatic or humble attitude in regard to the mystery of the cosmos. No dramas, therefore, regardless of what scientific cosmology currently says and might one day say about the beginning or the many worlds or again the multiverse. Traditional wisdom prepares us even for the latter possibility. Origen was adamant that many worlds preceded this one, a view that Basil, pondering divine omnipotence, appears to have corroborated. And so you can see the references there. I can send the paper to whoever is interested in it. For the time being, I leave out the topic of God's involvement in the creation of the universe and the universe's connection to the divine. I shall return to this topic a little later. Suffice it here to point out that for believers, any form of existence, from the large scale of the universe to the smallest grains of material accretion and quanta of energy and binary digits of information, is unconceivable without the ongoing divine input. So, no existence without ongoing divine input. It goes the same for cosmic evolution and change. The evidence regarding the universe's constant movement and transformation does not bother me in the least. By having a beginning of its existence, the universe cannot be perfect. Perfection is the province of the age to come, when, according to Christian faith, the reorganization of the fundamental elements will take place and the cosmos will be configured differently, whatever that might mean in physical terms. This is the teaching of the scriptures and the conviction of traditional witnesses such as Maximus the Confessor and Simeon the Theologian. According to the Orthodox tradition, the universe was not made in 7 literal days, its lifespan extending for 7 or 8 ages of indefinite lengths of time. Such is the belief of Bede the Venerable, John Damascene, and again Simeons. Throughout this immeasurable span of time, the universe undertakes countless changes, which Maximus calls expansions and contractions, or inflations and deflations. Earlier, Gregory of Nyssa expressed the view that the single event of creation, contemplatively perceived, actually unfolds as multiple events by which the original burst of energy called light or fire cools down into the intricate arabesques of cosmic tapestry. Against this backdrop, modern theologians such as Dumitru Stăniloae experience no difficulties in agreeing to the current scientific description of the universe's evolution. The same holds true for the contemporary view that the universe as we know it will one day cease to exist, an idea that does not shock me at all. Our faith proclaims the utter dependence of the universe on God in order to be and to thrive. As Athanasius of Alexandria points out, when considered in itself, the nature of things that are being brought into being, in other words, which have their existence out of non-being, is fluid, weak, and mortal. Or, again, fluid and dissolvable. And while God's energy sustains it in existence, the universe will nevertheless die one day, as we all will, in the hope of resurrection, that is, a wonderful transformation. It follows that what the scientists currently know about the universe cannot take us believers by surprise, at least not when it comes to the traditional sources mentioned just above. Granted, our own tradition does not provide us with the numbers, whether big or small, of the universe. But even if it does, and authors such as Gregory Palamas were interested in measuring the earth and in other matters of natural knowledge, while earlier Clement of Alexandria kept referring to the numbers and the measures undergirding reality. That is not what our faith is about. Faith does not describe the universe, and I fully agree with Alexei, its parameters and all that is therein. Instead, it interprets. It's a hermeneutic, Alexei says.
Yeah.
It interprets everything as creation and affirms the indissoluble connection between God and all things. That's the theological claim, that there is a connection between the existence of the universe and God. That's it. There's no other statement. But before I turn to this connection, one more point is in order, namely about the dark side of the universe and the significance of such terms as dark matter and energy. The scientific narrative outlined in the first part of this chapter reaches the climax, at least in what concerns our topic, what we know and what we don't know about the universe, in the discussion about what Lewis metaphorically calls the dark side. So, Geraint Lewis. The reader, I hope, has not taken this phrase in an ethical sense. This phrase denotes a humble approach to reality, which acknowledges the limitations of contemporary science. Gone are the certainties of the 19th century when optimistic researchers triumphantly announced that total knowledge is at hand. Relativity and quantum physics have ruined the sandcastle, and so did too chaos theory, string theory, M theory, quantum gravity, the quest for the theory of everything, and all sorts of other exotic items within the contemporary scientific portfolio. Nevertheless, the clearest sign of a change of attitude in regard to what we know is the deployment of such mysterious phrases as dark matter and dark energy. When contemporary scientists use these phrases, they mean that they have no idea whatsoever what the content of these layers of reality might be. As Geraint Lewis tells us, in total 70% of the universe must be dark energy, with 25% dark matter, whilst all the stars and gas and planets and people being a paltry 5%. Thus, 95% of the universe eludes us. We know so much about the 5%, albeit we still cannot be sure of how accurate our grasp of things is, but we are at a loss about most of the universe, its inner workings. Our knowledge led us to realize the immensity of the unknown. For a theologically trained believer as I am, and one with a taste for patristic wisdom at that, this is an admission of ignorance, though not of surrender. By definition, this is an apophatic or humble attitude, the breaking point of the modern arrogant claim of knowledge and power. The science of our age must be admired not only for what it managed to find out so far, and for what it will undoubtedly continue to discover in the future, but also for acknowledging its own limitations. And these limitations are equally obvious, we learned above, when it comes to not knowing where the universe comes from, why it is the way it is, and what the future holds for it. But let's talk more about the dark side, the utter unknown. Lewis suggests that in order to make sense of it, we might need a new physics, and that grasping this elusive side of things will lead us to a very different perception of reality. I wonder what that perception might be like. It is at this juncture that I, a theologically trained believer, suggest that the divine hypothesis should be seriously considered. What I propose is not a return to the God of the gaps fallacy, even though the gaps of our ignorance, as we found out in the first part of this chapter, are much wider than the firm grounds of what we know. My proposal indeed does not need either the God of the gaps or the interventionist God of the Western Middle Ages. This is so given the different setting of Orthodox theology, which traditionally does not operate with the Western medieval division between the natural and the supernatural. And it is this division that caused the modern clash between the Christian faith and scientific cosmology. Let me explain. While in the Middle Ages, Western theology deployed this division in order to affirm the supernatural suspension of nature's laws, the emerging sciences took advantage of it by affirming the redundancy of all supernatural agency, given the completeness and the autonomy of nature. In other words, both sides exploited the division in the spirit of an either-or logic. The current ideological warfare between theists and atheists, and between creationists and evolutionists, merely echoes this situation inherited to the Western culture. In turn, traditionally speaking, therefore, when it does not borrow from Western culture, Orthodox theology perceives reality very differently. Specifically, the supernatural, a term that for it denotes the divine activity, is within the universe, not outside, being inextricably mingled with nature's own matrix and energies. God does not disturb or suspend the laws of nature. Nature's laws are where God operates, as an underlying reality irreducible to the material universe. And this is a phrase that I love quoting. It's from John Barrow. May he rest in peace. Yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know about this.
Yeah, last year or the year before.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I didn't know. Accordingly, what we call nature is synergy, a platform where the divine energies and the universe's own energies cross paths and cooperate on an ongoing basis. A number of early Christian theologians, such as Basil, Gregory of Nyssa, and John Chrysostom, pondered the complex fundamental interactions between the divine and the cosmic energies. This theological view of the universe can very well coexist with the current and any other cosmology. It requires neither the change of our faith nor the rejection of science. I know what Alexei will say. Okay, so how about philosophy then? But I think there's something that we should discuss at some point. What kind of philosophy we're talking about? And I think philosophy you understand as phenomenology and hermeneutics, and I fully agree. But then the other question would be what kind of theology we're talking about, because the theology that I'm talking about is philosophical and hermeneutical by nature.
Yes. Yeah. We'll talk about this.
It is true that contemporary scientists, trained to think about a nature deprived of supernatural dimensions, might consider the above proposal with suspicion. But I have no intention to impose on them my theological view of reality. I am not a cosmic revolutionary, that's Geraint Lewis's phrase, and my command of the required mathematics is thoroughly absent. However, I would hope that contemporary scientists accustomed to the idea of having direct access only to 5% of the universe might show a little more flexibility than their 19th century predecessors, allowing for the unexpected whatever the form it would take, especially since what they know is not the pure and simple thick nature of a few centuries ago. Why rejecting then the divine hypothesis as I proposed it, even before having a possibility to test it? For the God I depict is not the old fellow hiding on the dark side of the moon, whence he throws wrathful thunderbolts at the frightened earthlings. It is, as Gregory the Theologian suggests, the transcendent fire that permeates the universe, moving through all things and connecting them. Basil's divine word that runs through the creation. Chrysostom's living energy of the spirit that enlivens the waters, the fields, the waves, the superstrings of the universe. And Maximus's unifying force that binds the cosmic regions together from within. No wonder the perception of the saints that the cosmos is unified as a single ray of the sun, to use the phrase of Gregory the Great and Adovnan of Iona. And while the divine presence eludes our technological measuring devices, it is not entirely ethereal. The transformed bodies of the saints, radiating dazzling light, herald it. Together with manifesting it recurrently, testing the theory through experiment, as it were, in various times and places, the glorious bodies of the saints are an implicit indicator of those other physical laws that we currently seek beyond the curtain of the dark side. Would the physics of the future be able to include within its logic of complementarity the idea of a supernatural which permeates the natural continuum? Irrespective of how the scientists of tomorrow will respond to this question, they can be certain of one thing, namely, traditional Orthodox theology is not against science. A plethora of modern contemporary voices, many more than the two mentioned above, Staniloae and Losky, attest to this fact. And you see here a respectable list of people, including our own Alexei Nesteruk. For traditionally, Orthodox theology has always incorporated scientific information as a starting point of its contemplation of God's creation. It is on this note that I draw the final line of my account, pointing out that apart from its convictions regarding God's activity, what Orthodox theology doesn't know about the universe overlaps with what science knows and knows not about it. For the Orthodox theological worldview is not scientific, regardless of how much science it would include at any given time in the history of its development. And so, what the cosmologists of tomorrow will discover about the universe will be as exciting for us believers as it will be for them. As Lovecraft wrote in 1927, though the area of the unknown has been steadily contracting for thousands of years, an infinite reservoir of mystery still engulfs most of the outer cosmos. We have come to know much, scientists and theologians alike, and in the foregoing we have learned that much more awaits us out there. We must, all of us, whether we are philosophers, scientists, or theologians, continue to wonder at the universe's vastness and complexity, seeking to grasp its marvels. And this is where I finish my own story.
Great, thank you very much. Great talk. I enjoyed this very much, yeah. I was following your paper. This is the second time. This is good. Okay, any questions, my friends, who are present with us? Any comments? Silence.
It seems that these days I make my case so compellingly that I seem to be put in a place in a full stop at the end of my discourse.
Oh, okay. Let me abuse a little bit of my power. I think that the presentation is very interesting. I mean, I would. This is just a suggestion that, of course, you divided this paper into two parts. But I mean, I would suggest that you make a sort of smooth transition between these two parts. I mean, somehow, I don't know how. We can discuss with this because I think that it's very consistent because you get the theological actually assessment of what was said in the first part. But I mean, again, conclusions and then theological perspective, I think it must be somehow mingled.
Oh yeah, well that's something. Look, I left that heading there, conclusions, as Geraint wrote initially.
Right.
Yeah, but this will become some like transitional conclusions or something. Yeah.
No, it's great. I mean, I like in particular that you indirectly supported my claim, which I made not even in my talk, but I mean in my book or in my.
Well, I'm a reader of your work.
About one particular aspect of cosmology, which is related to the human sciences aspect of cosmology, and this is absolutely true because what Geraint was saying here when I followed this, that in a way, there are many aspects of cosmology which are, strictly speaking, not caused by the necessities of physics as such. And in this sense, there is no physical necessity by inventing the theories. And in addition to what you said and he said, I would add up a book of Roger Penrose on fantasy in science. You remember, this is a very good book because for many people, I think it's clear after reading this book that whatever is concerned with the early universe is a sort of, fantasy. And I mean, more rigorously saying, it's a new scientific mythology which is possible, which is hermeneutical because it's a hermeneutic of the human condition, but yet we need to admit that, as you rightly said, that when people consider cosmologists as guru, as priests of creation or whatever, I mean, definitely it becomes excessive because in some sense, if cosmology becomes a part of ideology, public opinion, and if it's imposed through the popular literature, for example, yes, this becomes a little bit strange because, I mean, I always feel behind any ideology a sort of social order.
Yeah.
I mean, it means that, I mean, someone needs this, But I mean, in general, I completely agree with his indication that at some stage cosmology stops to be a natural science, because I think it's not a pseudoscience. It's not a natural science anymore. It's a science about human affairs.
Yeah, and like any other field of human expression or other kind of human expression, it depends entirely on us.
Yes.
It cannot be as objective as 19th century scientists dreamt of it to become.
Good. And the second point, again, it's just sharing my suggestion, because when you wrote about this divine hypothesis.
Yeah.
I tell you honestly, from my point of view, we must talk about divine hypothesis, because divine hypothesis is hypothesis for those people who a priori don't believe in God.
Well, yeah. Well, this is why I used inverted commas.
Yes.
Every time I because we know it's. I thought my allusion was transparent. I'm a buff of the history of science, and you know that moment when who was the astronomer of Napoleon, and after explaining to Napoleon his system of the world, Napoleon said, what has God to do with this? Laplace, yeah.
Laplace.
Laplace responded, "Sire, I don't need this hypothesis." So that was my illusion.
Yeah. Okay. But once again, my point that divinity and theology and religion in general, it's part of the human predisposition, and everyone who is posing a question about its own existence encounters, in fact, the divine, and that is why. Yeah, I would prefer not to say about the divine hypothesis, about the divine phenomenality or dimension.
No,
or
but I want to leave it there as an ironical reference to. But I'll include Laplace better, so that it's Thank you.
Yeah. All right, my friends. Do you have any questions? Oh, Ted Peters. Okay, Ted.
Both of you have used the term hermeneutical with considerable force. May I ask what you mean by hermeneutical, and where does it appear in your method? What are you interpreting?
Do you want to go or should I go?
It's a question to you.
Well, it's addressed to both of us because
Okay,
you're the culprit who introduced hermeneutics here.
Yes,
Okay, thank you, Ted. Look, in the backdrop of this paper, at least the part of it that I have written, there's a lot of my own research, and the references are there. Just last year, I have published a chapter in the second volume of this project, Science and Orthodoxy Around the World, where I have addressed this topic from the viewpoint of a methodological distinction. And there, I did not want to complicate things by questioning the objectivity of science. I said, look, I trust the work of other people the way I expect other people to trust my scholarship, for example. Yeah? I believe that these people who spend decades of their life doing research, scientific research, deserve my attention. And unless there's a competing theory that pops up in existence and annihilates the previous one or denies the previous one, I go by the major opinion, the major viewpoint or the established viewpoint. But then I said, what does theology do? And I said, theology doesn't come up with a world of facts, and this is where Alexei and I are in full agreement. I don't believe in theology as a scientific discipline that establishes facts. It interprets, and from this viewpoint, to cut it short, from this viewpoint, theology is by definition hermeneutical. If so you have to take this in the most general of meanings, because I'm a classicist and I take the many words of that are used in our contemporary culture etymologically, and in Greek it just means interpretation. So theology is an interpretative discipline. It's not a descriptive or analytical discipline in the sense in which, say, physics is. That's the simple answer to your question from my viewpoint. And I know that Alexei's answer will be more complex.
Do you need my answer, Ted? Would you like to hear this? Ted?
Yes.
Right, okay.
Yes, go ahead. Will it differ from those?
No, I think my first of all approach to hermeneutics and theology, because we are dealing with this hermeneutic constantly when we interpret, let's say, the gospel message, when we do exegesis. And what is typical for Christian theology, that this hermeneutics is not accomplished at any particular historical stage. This hermeneutics is endless, open-ended, as we say. And that is why people, even in the 21st century, they are continuing to interpret gospel message, and they interpret patristics. I've just been in a conference in Krakow where it was a conference on neo-patristic synthesis. Up to what extent we can actually use patristics in order to interpret it further. And theology in this sense is indeed hermeneutical, because it never ends. It never ends on a particular fact. Because as I try to say in my approach, theology is about existence. It's about immediate fact of the human existence, and this fact of the human existence being a physical fact, still interpreted. And the hermeneutics is open-ended, because you are given this birth, you are born, and in the act of birth and the event of birth, you are given by a chance to have this infinite hermeneutics. And then when you develop into the future, you produce the hermeneutics of your own birth, because effectively from a phenomenological point of view, this birth is concealed. You can't have access to it. So now, if you come back to science, science is slightly different. Why? Because if you're dealing with facts, for example, if you're dealing with technological applications of science, this is not hermeneutics. It's a particular application to scientific discovery, to constructing, for example, atomic bombs, constructing of accelerators, constructing power stations, and many, many other things. It's not a hermeneutics. So in fact, it's action, it's a fact. And why we make the difference between hermeneutics in science and actual performance in science? Because there are some things in science which can be presented as objects. In other words, we have phenomenality of objects. For example, if we construct sort of, laser, and we create a laser beam in the laboratory, we can approach this laser beam as an object or as a flow of photons. Why? Because we effectively can attachment to make something opposite to attachment. We detach ourselves. We detach ourselves from this thing, and this thing become object. Then there's no need for hermeneutics. It's a question of definition, of description. But then, if you go to insights, to something which is not obviously checked upon the rules of correspondence with the physical reality, for example, if we talk about the early universe, then as many reasonable people like John Barrow, so eternal memory, and for example, Roger Penrose, my mentor many years ago, they would say that this is not descriptive science, because it's not about objectivity, because objectivity cannot be verified. It's objectivity which is constitution of objectivity by means of cognitive faculties. But this type of constitutive objectivity, it's at the same time it's a hermeneutic. Hermeneutic of what? Because the question, hermeneutics of what? The hermeneutic of origins. Origins. So that's why what we feel as human beings, we feel these origins, we approach to these origins, we impose scientific research as means of approaching this origin, but we understand in advance that we never reach this origin per se. This means that we produce endless hermeneutics of this origin. And again, by referring to this book of Roger Penrose, he gives, in different words, the same qualification that all theories of the Big Bang, contemporary theories, they produce very interesting fantasy-like, he calls this chapter fantasy-like hermeneutics of the origins. And that's why what we have, ultimately, we have theological hermeneutics of origin, and we have scientific hermeneutic of origin. If I use slightly different language, we have narrative, we have the theological narrative, and we have a scientific narrative, but these narratives, they are both not descriptive. And if they're not descriptive, you can combine them, you can compare them as two narratives, but it's like to combine two types of fiction. the question is, from a philosophical point of view, what is a philosophical necessity for doing this? Because historically contingent, yes, we can take any piece of literature from here and any piece of science from there, and then can make this combination. But from a philosophical point of view, there is no intrinsic necessity in this, because it's absolutely historically contingent. But if it's historically contingent, it doesn't have any strong logical value. So this is the reason why my approach is based, when I try to take this to hermeneutics and to say, okay, these two hermeneutics, they originate from the same human being. So that's why the split of this hermeneutics is inside human beings. So that's why ultimately, in my last book, which you wrote, endorsement, is exactly stated that the dialogue between science and theology, dialogue between cosmology and theology, it's a constitution, it's an endless hermeneutic of the human condition. We cannot get out from this hermeneutics, from this split in hermeneutics. In other words, it's a phenomenological description from outside. I'm describing a human being not from inside, but from outside, saying, all right, we have this dialogue, and this dialogue describes me. So, I mean, this is my response to your question about.
Well, I think that's very, very nicely said, and I think there are times, and you gave a good example with regard to Big Bang theorizing, where scientists are hermeneutical as well, even if they don't recognize it. So, not always. You're right. In technology, you're not talking about hermeneutics, but you certainly are in some theories. Yeah.
Oh, great. Any more questions, friends? No?
I think that's it.
All right. Now, let me introduce my friend and colleague, Professor Andrey Pavlenko. He is